KoreSummit. Today's series is on Regulation CF. Is it right for your firm? And I want to thank our sponsors, both KoreConX and Nuvei, payment provider to the world's digital leading brands. So I'm going to start off with the industry has been maturing over the last 13 years. It's about the time the Jobs Act was originally signed into law. And we have an expert panel here we're going to dive into. And with it, the awareness, the approach, the legal framework, supporting technology, marketing, it's all evolved significantly for Regulation CF. Now, we all know that raising capital, it requires a lot of work. This isn't some panacea for the world to jump upon. And there's lots of options for companies to raise capital, but a lot of individual issuers and companies, they're looking at a myriad of different ways to raise capital today. And Regulation CF, who I'm a huge fan of, is truly helping to democratize capital. But is it right for your business? So that being said, I want to do a quick introduction for, as I indicated, we do truly have a great panel of experts. They've been around for a long, long time and have been instrumental in not only the where RegCF is today, but the growth of it. I want to start first off by introducing Sherwood Neiss. Woody, welcome. Woody's been a key figure in the crowdfunding industry. Actually played a pivotal role in shaping Title III in the Jobs Act. And he's also the co-author of Crowdfunding and Exemption Framework. And Woody's the co-founder of Crowdfund Capital Advisors. Woody, welcome. And we're going to jump in here after the rest of the panel introduction here. So from the legal side and a regulatory perspective, Jamie, I'd like to welcome Jamie Ostrow, Chief Administrator Officer, Partner at CrowdCheck Law, and whose firm has an extensive legal experience in regulation crowdfunding. And Jamie, I think you've pretty much seen it all over the years. So this is going to be fun and exciting to jump in and get your narrative. On the marketing side, I'd like to welcome back Jason Fishman from Digital Niche Agency. Hey, Jason. Digital Niche Agency has been really a leading investor acquisition firm, and you've seen a myriad of changes as well. So on that note, welcome to all. I want to jump in and reach out to Woody here, and let's start a little bit about the evolution of RegCF. Maybe you can give us the framework, and then we'll get into who it's appropriate for.
Well, initially it was companies could raise money from both retail and accredited investors, and they could do up to $1 million. In 2021, the SEC changed that to $5 million. So the profile of companies that are coming in when the industry launched was a lot of pre-revenue startup companies. Now we're seeing 65% of the companies being post-revenue established, meaning over 3 years old in business. But it's Main Street type of cash flowing businesses, a lot of them using debt crowdfunding. And then you've got your exit type of scenario companies that believe they've got, a future in a VC world or, an IPO eventually. They're on the equity side. But what started, with just a handful of offerings in 2016 when the industry went live has now been over 7,700 offerings just in regulation crowdfunding alone. There's been $2.1 billion that has been funneled into these startups in 1,200 cities across the United States and well over 500 industries. We collect this data on a daily basis. So I live in the world of, providing data for why this is working. And the fact that it provides, over 430,000 jobs. So it is a jobs engine, I think speaks to why it's working as well.
I love the fact that you are probably one of the most knowledgeable individuals from a data capture, what's going on in this space. A lot of individuals out there and firms go, not only is it right for me, is what might have been right for them 5 years ago may not be right today for different reasons, and vice versa. So again, the myriad. Jamie, let's start with the nitty gritty of it first when we get into the legal requirements, because everybody asks to say, okay, I can raise up to $5 million, but I hear I can also raise $1,070,000. I hear I needed audited financials. What's a Form C? Let's give us the rundown of what's required, because this is the pre-raise and everybody needs to understand what you need to do.
Of course. So I think it depends on what you're looking to raise. For a lot of companies, if you want to raise $5 million to start off the bat, you need to get audited financial statements for your last 2 completed fiscal years. And those will be good and those financial statements are good for 100 to 120 days until the end of your fiscal year. So if you're a calendar year, that's going to be the end of April. If you're like, hey, look, audit financial statements are not something I can do or have the funds to do right now. If you're a first-time issuer, you can do reviewed financial statements, and that's only for first-time people doing RegCF. And those will get you to, I guess it's not $1,070,000 anymore. It's $1,235,000 that you can raise for your first raise under RegCF using those financials. If you were a second-time issuer, it's half of that, so it's like $635 or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you are, or actually $617, and then if neither one of those, you can use CEO certified financials, but that's really getting you at the bottom. That's getting you at the bottom rung, and you can raise basically. What is it? $125,000 on those. So for a lot of it, so we see most companies either going in on the reviewed financials or looking to do it on the audited financials. And then in addition to the financials, you are going to need to do a Form C, which is a disclosure document, and RegCF requires that you use an intermediary. So you can't just say, okay, I'm going to do it by myself. There's always going to be a third party involved.
Okay, and traditionally that intermediary is a law firm that does these all day long to assist with the Form C. Not required, but more often than not, or a preparations firm that's really good at it and familiar. Would that be fair to say?
So the intermediary is actually, slight differentiation. The intermediary is going to be the broker dealer or funding portal who posts it on their website. So you can and there's basically two avenues that we've seen basically in RegCF, those that kind of do the bulletin board approach. So, they're going to have, you go to the website of the intermediary, and they're going to have lots of issuers on it, or those that let you kind of do a bespoke page and you send your people directly to the website.
Okay, so I guess I'll maybe take a step backwards. So I've got the Form C preparatory work. That's not what the broker dealer was. Mm-hmm. So when you referred to the intermediary, but in order for me to go live, I have two options today. And Woody, you've probably seen and Jason, the big change with this. So originally, a number of years ago, everybody was on kind of go to one place. If I want to do a RegCF, I'm going to a funding platform, and a funding platform has multiple offerings, multiple tombstones, and it's a great facilitator more often than not for companies raising lower amounts. Now that's changing somewhat. So the funding platform by law allows regulated by FINRA, and it makes sure that everything that needs to go on that offering for the general public, because the beauty of RegCF is I can do general solicitation to anybody out there. We'll dive into that more. Or I need a broker dealer to control an offering page, but it's my offering page and I'm not in the same platform per se as a whole bunch of other offerings. Would that be a pretty much correct assessment there?
Yeah, and Jason, I don't know if you want to jump in on that, but I'm more than happy to
please
give perspective. We've seen this evolution. Like when these funding portals started, it was really just funding portals that were not even broker dealers. They were this funding portal light, which is a sort of a FINRA type of established entity. But now we've seen these funding portals actually become broker dealers. First, they align themselves with broker dealers, and now they become broker dealers. Not all of them, but many of them, because there's benefits of being a broker dealer in the space where you can do solicitation that a funding portal can't do. So a funding portal can do, like Jamie was saying, it's like a listing. It's like, all these other companies that are up there. But a broker dealer can actually go out there and bring investors in. So there's benefits to that. And we've now seen broker dealers just coming into the space. And so they're coming in. And to your point, Peter, it's not happening on a page where you've got all these other offerings that you're competing with. It's, invest.yourcompany.com. So it's very specific to your company and very specific to your audience. And these broker dealers are having great success. And it's been sort of smart on their end. They've seen what these funding portals have been able to do. Now that we've got $2.1 billion, you can see if you look at the fees on that, it starts to add up. So these broker dealers have been smart. They're like, well, these are initially, that used to be like, these are way too small offerings for us. Like, we're not going to play in this space. But now they're like, well, these companies really start their funding journey, online, and then they need more rounds and they need bigger rounds, and they're going to graduate out of RegCF to Reg A or, Reg D or whatever. but we can play a role with them and be a partner with them along that entire funding pathway. And so we're seeing these the broker dealers like Dalmore and Dealmaker really, play a, put a stake down and say, this is the role we want to play in that space.
No, and that's a good point. So the flexibility that's afforded now, and being a technology platform provider, we see it all. So you make comments of like broker dealers, issuers go, hey, I want to work. What's the role of a broker dealer in a RegCF and a Reg A? And very often the key ingredient is it's compliance. They're doing compliance for the most part. And we're going to dovetail into Jason on the marketing side of it. So when a company today is using a RegCF or Reg D, we're going to focus on the RegCF today. And I can put a landing page out there, and I'm going to spend my energies and my efforts driving traffic to my page per se, that's monitored and controlled by a broker dealer. I also get control of my audience. So as a tech provider, we're behind the scenes. We're agnostic. We work with lots of broker dealers. We do funding platforms, marketplaces, issuances, but it's not about us. So some are saying, I want to control the audience. Other ones go, I want to facilitate you controlling your audience, which is your investor and your brand advocates. So Jason, like, what are you seeing? You used to market and still do to platforms that might have a myriad of offerings. Now you do lots of work across the board. What's been some of those changes that you're seeing?
Sure. And there's pros and cons to each option. The thing that you need to take into account, I don't even want to position it as a con for self-publishing and having this listed on your own site, as Sherwood was saying, invest in, and then your URL can be part of it directly, is you need to bring the audience. And the way I envision the analytics, I'm also, in the weeds, in the data all day, is 50,000 visitors per $1 million raised. And what that means is a 2% conversion rate. Google says an average conversion rate is 2.35% across the entire internet. So if you're getting 1,000 investors off 50,000 visitors, and they're participating at an average of $1,000 each, which is a number I've heard here at the KoreSummit Web Series before. It's a number used across RegCF. I've actually looked at some studies that were 500 to 1,000. We've worked on campaigns that were $3,000 average investments, taking into account your minimum level participation alongside $5,000, $10,000 investments, but much higher in many cases. But I think that is the right message to get out there, is you're going to need a relatively large amount of traffic to produce enough investors at these levels to substantiate your goal. So you start applying that to $5 million or other types of goal amounts. And this is largely a marketing play once you've been able to work with the legal, once you've been able to work on everything around your audit, all crucial components of this. But what I see is, if I look across those 7,700 offerings that Sherwood was mentioning there, the top 10% are really moving, and the bottom 50% are somewhat stagnant. I need to be going to Crowdfund Capital Advisors and getting the data from there. There's actually a less amount of campaigns reporting on King's Crowd, but I get a lot of data and analytics. I do a report with my team every Monday because we want to get a pulse. We want to see what's moving, which campaigns are at the top. And if I look at it on a monthly level, the bottom 50% are producing less than 10K a month in capital. The top 10%, 150K, many months, some months 120K or more. The top 10 campaigns, oh man, 500,000, some months 5 million on some of these initiatives. But I really like to paint that picture and show the entire landscape, because I'll see too many founders, too many issuers approach this vehicle and think, hey, just by going live, we're going to be able to do 5 million. Do you think 2 months, 3 months, Jason? Do you think that's a good, setup for us? When I have to point out, hey, if I'm looking at King's Crowd, there's about 40 companies to date that have done the full 5 million, given that's only since that, March 2021 era. So, campaigns before that are not included. They were not able to go past 1.07 million. But that's the big piece I try to emphasize to founders and in planning, is determine your entire campaign strategy, your audiences, where you're going to be reaching them, the creative, advertising, content messaging you're going to be rolling out, strategic partners that can get you there. But don't hope that, one financial email newsletter is going to do it. I mean, they're inundated with different offerings and have to choose the best deal flow for their audiences. Really be intentional about where you're planning on getting that traffic and setting your campaign up for success.
No, and you're correct. So marketing is key, because there are a lot of private companies. The data also, and this might be a commentary to you, Woody, is that so very often the data. So we see customers that say, "Hey, I'm doing a direct offering," and having some monster raises. Well, nobody would report that because they don't have to report outside of their community, so it's not there. So I think the numbers are actually bigger than what I just see over there. Bigger on not just the bigger on the successful companies, would also mean bigger on the non-successful companies, but they're just not, that data is not necessarily captured. So if somebody does an offering on their page, I raised $5 million and I'm jumping into other offerings, the world might not know that particular entity. And that's like, because I'm a private company. So that's just something out there to the issuers too, to say, because they ask us all the time, and we're also a transfer agent, but so when they do the raise, they go, "Peter, can you tell me how much money those guys raised?" And I says, "Nope, this is confidential. It's private information." There's a Chinese wall literally between the transfer side of it and book of records and cap table management. And this dovetails into Jamie's world a little bit of saying, hey, what are the legal aspects of this? I want to take a step backwards for a sec on the legal. So we hear that, okay, I can raise $5 million. I have to prepare a document. We talk about this Form C. I have to disclose that document, and it has to be available on my web property, wherever that resides. And that's where a broker comes in to basically make sure that that's on there, or a funding platform make sure that information for FINRA and then the governing bodies, that it's there. But when you're actually doing that document, Jamie, the types of companies and what's going into those documents today, I'm just getting all kinds of crazy stuff where companies are saying, for example, I'm a public company, but I have a subsidiary. And this is what Sherwood was saying. It's not just startups today. It could be existing firms. That let's dive into the legal requirements of that, what I can and can't do.
Sure. And just a quick thing on like dovetailing a little bit on Jason is I also see, and I'm sure Jason and Woody see it as well, different types of companies are more suited for crowdfunding than other companies, right? If you have a consumer good and you already have a following, or if you have a product or, a founder who's famous, like some of those companies, no matter how much Jason and his team are technically like able and super talented, you can overcome from just having natural like affinity to a product, or people already know a product is real, or they have, or so-and-so founded this company and they're excited to participate with so-and-so. As far as legal requirements, RegCF, not only do you have the information on the funding on your intermediary, which is either the funding portal or the website controlled by the broker dealer, you will also have to file with EDGAR, which is the SEC's system. So anybody who wants to can go on EDGAR and go and check out and be like, oh, this person filed a Form C and all this information is public and will be to eternity as long as EDGAR remains around. I mean, try taking something off of EDGAR once you filed it, and they will do it in very discrete, limited circumstances, like you accidentally filed like someone's social security number or something like that. As far as who can do RegCF, so KoreConX is a Canadian company. So it turns out Reg A is Canadian and US issuers. RegCF is only US issuers, which means the company needs to be, it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be based in the US, but the company has to be, for RegCF at least, has to be formed under a US state or territory. And then Peter was talking about subsidiaries, because there are certain types of companies that can't do RegCF. So I'm an Exchange Act reporting company. I'm already a public company in the US. I am actually not allowed to do RegCF if that was the case, and you would have to, that you can potentially do it with a subsidiary, but it's going to start getting a little bit of like what is it, right? Like who, you can't have like an unidentified co-issuer, like an unidentified party who's really the beneficiary of what's going on. You have to think about who really is the issuer. Is this a legitimate subsidiary? Does it have a legitimate business, or is this a subsidiary just formed to funnel money up to the issuer, right?
And I think you hit a great
Anything in
point.
the latter.
And I think I read this on your firm's website, by the way, with your CEO. So ultimately, the investor must think, and the company must think, ultimately, whose performance is the investor relying upon? So I may be a foreign company, but I have a U.S. entity doing a RegCF, and I can't funnel it for the benefactor of the whole, but maybe, and I won't overstep my legal skis here, so I'll be anecdotal in my comment here, but maybe there's a licensing arrangement between a parent and a U.S. company. There's a relationship, but it has to be known that the investor is investing in this U.S. firm. And that's where we've seen some raises, and companies can do it successfully, but they need to speak to firms like CrowdCheck and get legal advice to structure this properly. So yeah, you can be a public company, but you can't be funneling it, through that RegCF side of it. So it's for private companies. It's meant to, again, for the public at large, but there's ways around it. Woody?
I mean, I would just say that if you are a foreign issuer and you want to do this, that wasn't the intent of this, RegCF. It was really to help U.S. issuers raise capital. And just because, I have all the data and I've seen every single company that has raised money via RegCF, I'll just tell you that the success rate of foreign issuers is very low. The ones that have raised money haven't raised that much money. But the principles to what Jason was talking about before is it really comes down to your audience. So if you're a foreign issuer and you're raising money in the U.S., your audience is probably foreign as well. They're not necessarily going to be investing in your U.S. entity. So, I would just, if anyone foreign is listening, you can do it. Maybe, there's other exemptions under which you want to pursue, that'll give you a little more flexibility as well. Just the data doesn't prove that it's such a great thing for foreign issuers.
Yeah, I was thinking more on the lines too of a publicly traded U.S. company, for example, that is starting up some other companies. They just need that arm's length relationship, and that's what I'm seeing more. So we've got some U.S. firms that are going, hey, I was public over here. We've got all these other companies, and we're starting these startups. We may have a relationship, but not a direct benefit from the money that's coming in from those investors. So the investor is investing in the new co, basically. So when it comes to the considerations, okay, I got my legal, I've got my Form Cs, timeline. How long does it take to get a RegCF up and running?
I mean, just from, I've been through these offerings personally, and just by watching them, if you've got all your ducks in a row, even if you think you have all your ducks in a row, you need to estimate that it's going to take you probably 2 months to get it done. Just because the reviewed, if you're going to raise over 124,000, you need that reviewed financial. I'm not even talking about the audit side. That's going to take, you have to budget much longer for that. But with reviewed financials, you need a solid 3 weeks to go through it, unless it's, you have pre-revenue, it's just zeros that they're going through. So you need to budget for that. And then it just takes time and a team to put together these, the disclosures necessary that you need for Form C and for, to put up on the offering page. There's a video that in many cases that needs to put together. That doesn't happen overnight. You need to put the whole framework for that together. You need to film it. It needs to be edited. And then you need to, have it done. So that's going to take a few weeks itself. So in the best of circumstances, I think it'll take 2 months to get it done. I tell people you should budget at least 4, though, to account for any bumps in the road along the way. And then when your offering is live, when the industry launched, these offerings were like 6 months long, the window from the file date to the deadline date. I think as of October, this past October, when we ran our report this past month, it was about 121 days. So we've seen the window for which these offerings are live has condensed. I think a lot of that comes down to market dynamics. You've got these geopolitical events, you've got rising interest rates. So you've got issuers that are like, A, they're saying, is this the right time for me to go out and raise capital? So they're wondering, about that. And then B, they're like, well, if I raise my money and something goes wrong, our investor's going to pull out. So they're shortening the window under which they're raising this money. So, personally, I think that at least 2 months, maybe 4 months pre, And then these offerings are going to be at least 90 days, if or more.
Yeah,
than that.
and I think that's certainly what we've experienced from a tech, because ultimately we have to pull together all the pieces to do an issuance. So we deal with the brokers, we deal with the payment rail providers, we deal with the agencies. And I think the key to shorten all of it, because we've seen, and I'll suggest to people, I said, you can be up and running as fast as 40 days, provided you're doing multiple things in tandem. You're doing your Form C, you got your marketing agency lined up, you're engaging with the tech platform. If everybody's in sync, but if you're working from a linear perspective, you can just drag and drag and drag. So that's part of that structure. So it all starts to any of the issuers or companies considering RegCF is understand the regs and understand all the intermediaries and the participants from your lawyer, your escrow. And I cannot help overemphasize, start to pre-plan your marketing, because then on day one, you're moving forward. Whether it's the marketing, whether it's the tech platform, whether it's a BD, too often companies are doing it linear, and you want to go 2, 3, 4, 5 month delay. It's because you said, okay, I did my legal, but I can't file it because I want to go live. Oh, now I'm going to go talk to my tech guys, and they're going to say, okay, we need to connect you to the payment providers, the escrow providers. We need this seamless. There's a whole litany of compliance requirements. You can't do it that way. Don't do it like that, or you're going to delay it. So I think, the 2-month planning is more realistic for a lot of companies, because at least they're saying, okay, if I do it all together in unison and have a good team behind me, I can be fast. But if I'm also operating my company, I have to be aware of that. So one of the comments that I heard here, and this is it goes back on the legal. So I've got investors coming in. I've decided that they're coming in under Reg CF versus Reg A versus Reg D. The ability for that investor to change their mind, and the ability to communicate with that investor to say, hey, Peter, we're closing this. You have the ability to do what, Jamie?
So RegCF actually has very specific rules when it comes to that. So RegCF, all offerings on RegCF are conditional. It used to be, you see a target amount. RegCF has some odd nomenclature. The target amount is the minimum offering in order for money to be kept by the issuer. And then the oversubscription amount is really the maximum amount. And I feel like my clients get confused on it all the time because the wording is just odd. The oversubscription is the maximum amount. So and then you have the target date, which is the end date of the offering. So what we see for a lot of clients is once you hit the target amount, once you hit the target amount, you can close the offering at any time. But RegCF has specific mandated rules that you have to give investors 5-day notice, and you also have to have disclosure that you're going to do rolling close. These are called rolling closing. You have to give investors 5-day notice. And RegCF is completely conditional until the last 48 hours, and they can pull out until the last 48 hours. Like, I say, all right, I'm going to close on Friday. We're actually Saturday now, but, and that means give 5 days, whatever. I give people 5 days. The first 3 days you can pull out. You don't even have to give a reason. You can just say, I'm not interested. I want my money back. And then after that, you're going to be bound by it. And then if you go to the end of the offering, the last 2 days, and then the last 2 days, again, the last 48 hours, you're going to be bound. Anytime ahead of that, if there wasn't any notice, you can pull out. There's no reason. You don't have to give a reason. You're entitled to. Your money's completely revocable in that case. Just know that the funding portals, intermediaries, broker dealers, there are going to be obligations along the way of providing investors notice, because the SEC was somewhat paternalistic and fairly so. Like when they set up these rules that, you need to let investors know what the playing field is. And then those rules are also going to be in any Form C out there. And then any intermediary is going to have to include investor materials on the website. So when I go to, whether it's, the bulletin board, whether it's a bespoke website that the broker dealer is in charge of, there's going to be links out there so investors can understand the rules.
No, and that's perfect. A perfect segue into, I guess, on the marketing side to Jason, what goes on to these offering pages. And more importantly is, okay, if we've got these rules that say I need to notify that investor from a technology perspective, and that's where I live and breathe. We live and breathe compliance, technology. We have to do things like, boy, Peter, you may be able to track every single investor that goes through behind the scenes on your tech that says, hey, Peter was notified 48 hours. He received the email that he could cancel this. So it's a litany of data. This isn't to scare the issuers out there. This is to say that putting together your team and your architecture so third parties you can rely upon to do their job compliantly for you. The tricky part is the rules sometime and often change slightly. So you need that flexibility so that both your technology and your marketing teams can adapt accordingly. So let's look at, so Jason, on an offering page, because you're on the marketing side of it, the broker dealer is going to indicate what needs to be on a CF offering page, which is a little different than a Reg A plus, by the way. What are some of the key things? I heard Jamie make a comment on, I need an FAQ. I need to have the ability for investors to chat, for example, or communicate, provide information. What are you finding? What are you seeing? Flexibility from a marketing perspective, as long as the compliant things are there. When I'm dealing with the direct issuance versus, I'll call it cookie cutter, where it might be easier, but I kind of look like everybody else to a degree.
Sure. So this is another advantage of self-publishing, is you have more control of what's going into your actual offering page. Now, this is the central location where all investors are being pointed towards. I mean, it's the democratization of these investment opportunities for those investors, as well as your access to capital. Everyone's presented with the same information. So you want to use this as your anchor, to say the least. And it should be stronger somehow than an in-person sit down with you and your team. You can have a pitch video that encapsulates what that meeting dynamic would consist of. You could further go on to show video clips, imagery of your product, facilities, team members, your actual platform. You could show testimonials from lead investors, lead partners, industry experts. People don't believe what they see online. The more social proof on these offering pages, the better. You want to really showcase that third-party validation. And you could take your traditional pitch deck, look at the elements that are included in there. When I look at investor reviews, the team is always one of the key points that they bring up. Make sure to emphasize your team. If your founder, if your upper management is not present, that could say something. Alternatively, if you're highlighting their background and successes and exits and show who's really driving the ship, you can use this to create that sense of trust that social proof does from those internal individuals. Definitely talking about problem, solution. You're going to want to work with Jamie and Woody in determining what's compliant, what could be mentioned in terms of the industry to paint the picture of where your organization is going without making forward-looking statements and wording everything in a compliant manner. Meanwhile, you want to speak to that opportunity in a way that is approved. And, financials, use of proceeds, anything that an investor would ask offline, you want to make sure is represented online. I look at a lot of offline and online comparisons. Digital allows for scale. You can literally have millions of people, millions of prospective target audience members go to this offering page. You want to make sure they're not left with question marks and that they understand the timelines. As Woody was pointing out with those shorter time periods, I think some of the issuers, whether it's with a platform recommendation, one of the third parties working with them, have tried to position their campaign in shorter time periods. That sense of immediacy, I could tell you firsthand from closing periods, can be where you get the most action from audiences. The final 2 weeks of a campaign, final month of a campaign can often be, the most investors per day that you're going to see throughout the entire initiative. So on a 3-month run, you're bringing in existing audiences in that first month, starting to target new audiences. You're showcasing momentum, traction, as Peter was mentioning, in those chat sections, what we call portal update sections, where we want to determine what we're pointing towards each week, whether it's new partnerships or a podcast appearance or some type of event pitch that took place or panel or keynote. We really need to illustrate to audiences that type of movement. I used the word stagnant before. That is not what you want on your campaigns. You don't want investors feeling like your company only exists, only continues to grow with the success of this round, as much as this is the opportunity for them to get involved and at this valuation level. So all of those pieces here on the offering page. And Peter, to the nature of your last question as well, too, you're going to be able to see all the analytics. There are FINRA regulated portals that don't provide enough information to follow up with investors in between rounds. You're going to be able to see everything about the individuals all the way through. So conversion rate optimization, making sure any changes are compliant, of course, but being able to see what's physically producing, showing up in the analytics, and make lifts so that you're seeing a higher conversion rate along the way is part of the equation as well.
My experience, and I've seen a lot of things where people, you alluded to at the very start, was don't put up your page and expect they're going to come. Or if they do come, I'm not going to invest right away. What's one of the first things I'm going to do as a human being? I might do a little Google search. If I see you as a thought leader or an industry leader, it doesn't have to be huge, but I need some trust. I need other things. So that's where the marketing also comes into. It's not just funnel everything into this page. It's also to give me a level of trust to say, what initiatives is this company? Where are they speaking? So founders also need to recognize that you've got to put yourself out there, because when I'm looking, if I don't see you anywhere else, I'm not feeling as good, no matter how much I love your product and your offering. I need to have that other element of trust. So it's multiple touch points for any investor. No different than I was looking at a new pair of shoes recently online, and I searched and do my little Google. I don't just buy it out of the gate. I'm investing in your company. So you've got my attention. I'm having an emotional connection. The comment of what types of companies is that ideally suited for. I'm seeing everything under the sun. It's the relationship. Are some sectors better or worse? Before I do that, though, I just made a note here, and this is more for Jamie, because I think somebody made a comment to bad actor. So when you're doing your prepping and your work, somebody was asking me the question, what's a bad actor? What does that really mean? And this is just comes back to that level of trust. Maybe Jamie, I'll swing that to you.
Sure.
Oh,
so can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. When doing Reg A, so this is not just for Reg CF, it's also for Reg A and Reg D. The SEC made rules that certain people cannot participate in the offering, and they set basically requirements for, bad actors can't participate. It depends, I won't go through all the requirements, but some people who've committed crimes, but it's basically, if you've committed a financial crime within the last 5 to 10 years, been convicted of it, and or have some issue with a state regulator. Again, some of that stuff can stale out after a period of time, but let's say you're barred from FINRA or the SEC from ever participating in an offering, you can't do it. So there are specific rules, and then if anybody has a question, people come to us all the time, right? It's going to be, this is my background. Always be upfront with your lawyers or your counselors, right? That I have this in the background, because what we do try to do is front load it, right? We have a questionnaire, we have the bad actor stuff when people come to us, and a lot of the funding portals and broker dealers do. We try and front load, doing the searches, because we'll search on third party databases to see what comes up. But also, just because you might have done something in the past doesn't necessarily make you a bad actor. It's only specified crimes or specified things. So it's worth having an honest conversation with your counselor to figure out where you are. I would say, probably in all of the jails that we worked on, there was only a handful of them where we had to, the person was involved or whatever. And it was the founder of the company owned 80%. And, this was just not feasible given what they've done. And usually it's fairly recently to participate in this type of offering.
So at the end of the day, again, it's just say, understand the rules and the regulations. You're talking to your lawyer up front. or advisors up front that are saying, hey, if I got to do a bad actor check, I don't want to go down this path and hire Jason and hire Peter for tech and all these things, only to realize that, whoops, I've got to make a structural change within my company. So these things are all easy to do, and everybody at this panel here is there to help. We talk about it in education, and that's what it's all about. The regulations are amazing. They're growing exponentially. More and more companies will be successful with those raises if they do the proper planning and preparation up front and really know what they're getting into. From that side of it, I get a question right now, and Jason, I know in the last conversations we've had, companies are going, hey, I want to do a CF. Jamie, we're focused on CF today. It's up to 5 million. It's the easiest exemption to go live. It doesn't mean that you're protecting your investors. There's certain limits on the investors, and people often ask to say, okay, anybody can invest in my company, but I need to protect those investors. So they're under the regulation crowdfunding exemption. Some of those guidelines say, well, what are those guidelines? It's based on my income, for example. Somebody want to jump into that?
Guess it'll be me. So basically, there's a minimum that you can invest, but just keep in mind, though, it's going to be a minimum that you can invest on an annual basis. It's going to be, I probably should double check it, but it's going to be, I think it's the greater of 10% of your income / net worth. And then there's going to be a baseline, I think, $2,500 a year that anybody can invest regardless of their income or net worth. Mm-hmm. However, there's a second category of individual, which is which is our accredited investors. And actually, I forget the exact number, 7 whatever percent, like 10%. I don't know if Americans are accredited investors. It's basically individuals who've either 200,000 a year, 300,000 with their spouse or spousal equivalent, or have a certain amount, basically a million in liquid assets, excluding your home. There's a whole list of things. You probably know it, like with your broker dealer or somebody. If you were an accredited investor, you've probably gone through the process before. But accredited investors basically don't have limits on what they can invest, with the idea that accredited investors know kind of what, the SEC doesn't see the need to protect accredited investors the same way there is the need to protect other investors.
Yeah, so let me, and again, I won't overstep my legal. I think you touched on it. I'll do a minor correction, but that's only because as a tech provider, we need to automate these things. So imagine an investor comes into a platform, and a CF is different than a Reg A. So you're right, on the Reg A, it's approximately 10% of my net income or my net worth or my annual income, whatever the higher of the two is. And the investor logs in and says, I want to buy 500 shares, and it's going to, and they're going to tell you that I make how much money a year. But the beautiful thing about a Reg CF and a Reg A is I do not have to prove it as the broker dealer. It's self accreditation. So if I make $100,000, the platform is going to tell you, Peter, you're allowed to invest this amount. On a CF, it's slightly, the numbers are different, but the math gets calculated automatically. If you make under $107,000, I think it's approximately 5% of your income at a $2,500 threshold. And the rules change slightly. But the point I'm trying to make here is the investor says, hey, I make so much money. And the technology helps to facilitate and say, you're allowed to invest this amount. It's meant to be inclusive, but not onerous. And it's the easiest way for investors to also invest with. Jason, you see these numbers all the time. Credit card, ACH, wire transfer. I want to invest $1,000. I probably don't want to do a wire transfer. What are you finding from the payment rail side of it?
Yeah, we see it all and work on a whole spectrum of different campaigns, as you've mentioned. But there are definitely payment platforms that are more streamlined, others that will see issues down the line. It's always frustrating when you see a total amount raised and then days later, weeks later, that amount's lower for payments that didn't go through. And it becomes even more difficult with advertising because the pixel conversion is still going to take place. What the tracking mechanism, the pixel is telling us is an ad reached this user and this user reached the confirmation page, which is only accessible after completing an investment. So we then have to go back into the numbers, and it's just some of the holes of analytics we see on the marketing side where we have to make sense of what we're able to track with the pixel, what we're not able to track, and how to correct the data later on.
Okay, so smart firms are going to track, just like e-commerce. You're going to monitor the individuals. You're going to have multiple touch points for those individuals.
Yeah.
Woody, when it comes to things like, okay, we're talking about RegCFs. I got a number of issuers from a technology perspective that say, I'm doing a CF and I'm also doing a Reg D, or I'm doing a CF and I'm going to roll into a Reg A. What are you seeing out there? And maybe we can discuss collectively as to what are some of the reasons behind that, and when is it right to look at those things?
Well, I think, as you grow as an entity, your needs and the type of capital you need and how much you need changes. So within crowdfunding, I mean, it's been amazing. There's, we've seen multiple companies doing follow-on rounds. In October, 20.4% of all the issuers in the month of October were doing a follow-on round. So that speaks to the need for crowdfunding. It speaks to crowdfunding working for them as a viable means for capital. And we've seen companies do up to 7 or 8 of these rounds through crowdfunding. But, you're going to cap out. Like if you're scaling as a business, your capital needs are going to be very different from when you first started. And you're most likely going to need over 5 million. And that's where these parallel offerings come in. That's where Reg A really comes in, because you can now graduate into these different exemptions, or you could just, say, I'm ready to go on to venture capital and do a Reg D offering with them. We see a lot of that happening in the space as well, which I think is the general evolution of what happens in these offerings. If you're a great company, you're not really going to stay in the Reg CF space, because you're really going to want the hand-holding that you could probably get from venture capital, because Reg CF is about, that community. It's about engaging those investors as brand advocates. It's very, very powerful. And that, once you have them, you can carry on with them through the life cycle of the funding. So if you then get venture capital financing to really help you to get that to that next level, you can still leverage the crowd that's come in early on. So, we're 7.5 years into this. We went live in 2016. We're seeing a lot of the evolution take place. There's been 2 companies, I think, that had IPOs related to it. Again, it really just depends on the company. But by the way, to go back to what Jason was talking about earlier, if you're going on for that venture capital financing, these chat boards and this, where people are communicating is a critical part where you need to be paying attention. We started a venture fund to invest in crowdfunding offerings. And we built an algorithm that ranks all the companies that are coming in, compares it to companies that have had successful exits. And we look for signals in the new companies coming in to decide if we want to invest in them. Every week, we get a prediction of the companies that come in to decide whether we should do our diligence on them. When we do our diligence, it's very much like VC's due diligence. We ask questions. And we do that on the platform because that's where the communication is supposed to take place. I'm stunned at how many entrepreneurs, these founders, that don't respond. If you are going to be raising money from investors, you need to treat these investors the way you want to be treated, which is communicated with. If they ask you a question, answer the question. If it's been asked already because there's 300 questions that have been asked, just say, I'd like to, let you know that, we also answered it down here, but here's what we said before. You can be very kind about it. No one's going to take the time to read all 600 questions, but know if a VC is really doing their diligence on your company too, if they want to invest in you, they're going to be looking to see that you've been responsive to them, because if you haven't been responsive to the crowd, what makes them believe that you're going to be responsive to them? So if you're listening to this, pay very close attention to that chat area, because you really just need to stay on top of that game. I think it's like a very critical thing. We've passed on many offerings because the CEO just did not respond to our question.
That's a really good point. I think I keep coming back to this thing of trust. You're passionate about your company. You have an amazing vehicle to share it to the public at large. But you have to be you got to communicate with your audience. You got to communicate with those potential investors. And people have a different narrative or different appetite depending on who they might be. We've talked on past panels to say, somebody was asking me up here about, the types of companies. Well, we talk about consumer goods. I've seen vodka companies, 2 vodka companies, same time. One's raising capital, one's not. They're both selling vodka. One communicates and has a relationship. Not everybody gets to go and, taste that particular vodka. The point was the investors looking at, I see what they're doing. Maybe this is the new big company. It's the ability for that investor to have an opportunity to participate. You're selling your story, but at the same time, you have to be able to give them the opportunity if they want to dive deeper, because that's the bigger investor. And on that note, successful raises that I've seen for RegCFs, using RegCFs, rolling right into Reg A's, people have asked me, what have you seen that's been monstrous? I'm not exaggerating. I've seen companies do $50 to $100 million through multiple raises, and nobody even knows that these companies are doing it with tens of thousands of investors. And part of that is because their investors are reinvesting. They're gaining trust. Jason, Jamie, have you get companies refiling with you? What did you see out there?
Yeah, we're working with one group on their 6th round right now, and I've brought in over 8,000 investors to them, and they've used all of the Reg D, Reg A plus, RegCF, and what worked for their growth, their evolution. I really like that stat, Woody, on the October follow-up rounds. Once you see success with RegCF and at the valuations you're setting, and that the investors are more valuable than their first investment. I mean, we've seen all different types of B2B business opportunities, press, franchise opportunities. The investors tend to serve as ambassadors ongoing, past the round. So we'll see issuers with decent levels of success state that, they're completing the round and not sure they're going to ever come back to RegCF, and 2-3 months later tell us they're, filing and want to start with their marketing early this time. Back to your question about timelines, as Peter mentioned, make sure you're putting enough time in there for marketing planning. And as soon as you start determining to go down this route, let alone in between rounds, seed partnerships, build up your audience, make sure you're not priming, and make sure any messaging you're doing is compliant. So speak with Jamie, speak with your legal counsel about it. But there is definitely potential for multiple rounds and for having more success. There may be a list of investors who did not participate in the first round on time. And day one, week one, you're able to open up with their backing and be able to continue to build on top of that momentum throughout your next round.
Let's talk a little bit about, you made a comment about those investors. Oh, I missed out. So I had that fear of missing out, and the company's hitting milestones, but they're communicating those milestones. Maybe I'm in real estate. I've got shovel in the ground and I'm telling you my story. Maybe I'm a pre-revenue, but you're communicating, and you're not asking, my analogy is I'm not asking to, it's like me walking to a restaurant and I see that pretty lady across the way. I don't just pull a ring out of my pocket and throw at her. Maybe we have to have a conversation first. Unfortunately, I see failed raises where company goes, I love my product. My page is there. Why aren't they coming? You have no relationship with me. It could be the most beautiful website. You've got all your contact there. But start the relationship, start that conversation, and use things like social media. And one of the things, and this dovetails into the regulatory side of it, under these exemptions, under Reg CF and a Reg A, for example, but we're focusing on the CF, you have the ability to incentivize your investor. No different than, hey, I'm a VC coming in and I'm the first guy at the table, and first money should have some benefits. Same thing you can do with a regulation crowd fund. I can say, hey, those investors that invest in the first 90 days are going to get things like bonus shares. Those investors that invest certain amounts of money might be rewarded differently. There's a lot of creative flexibility that an issuer can actually do if they understand the regulations, because I've seen issuers go from the tech side go, I didn't know that I could do that, You say that's why you got to talk to your marketing folks. That's recognize and understand the regs. What are some of the creative things that you've seen, Jason, that help just make me feel good as an investor? I like the company. Maybe I invest a little bit more because. I think you're on mute there. Or Woody, maybe you've seen some things. Anybody can weigh in.
Sorry, I had a Wi-Fi delay there trying to unmute. But yes, I mean, we've seen the use of perks from the first round onwards. As Woody was mentioning, the most proactive founders tend to have the most successful raises. So being able to answer all of the Q&A sections, being able to host webinars and formats where you can invite all investors and speak to those question and answers compliantly in between rounds, and even just giving investor updates. It's always surprising to me how a founder, an issuer will have a successful round and then not provide updates to the investors, when, as mentioned before, they can be more valuable than the initial capital itself. And then during the early stages of that next round, having similar types of webinars, content. Peter, you mentioned it's usually not a first touch point, a first visit that an investment takes place. 7 touch points or more is what we tell clients. You want to really map out what they're going to see in terms of content as they're searching around and doing their due diligence. And if there is a webinar once a month, weekly, we've seen with some of our larger issuers, if there's an article coming out every other week, a video clip simultaneous every other week, a portal update every week, it says something and can be what's needed to actually have that individual solidify their investment. The updates are the fun part, and how you're going to show that you're hitting your milestones. What you talked about in the first round is coming to life, and now is the time for them to get involved.
And I think you nailed it. I mean, we talk about things like not milestones. We talk about telling a story. I think people have to realize that I have a dream. I've got a vision. I'm running my business. I need to share that accurately, truthfully to an audience, because the public couldn't do this before. This is still the early, they're still building the stadium, and the general public is now starting to say, I didn't know that I could own a piece of a building. I didn't know that I could own a piece of a franchise. I didn't know that I could own a company that might be the next Tesla. And my risk reward could be significant. Maybe I can invest in a company that I'm passionate about because it's ESG related. And all of those, so every type of company today was like, is this for me? Ask yourself the question, who loves my company or could be interested in my opportunity, and can I tell my story? The difference here is I'm not running around looking for 10 guys that have $1 million in their pocket. I'm going to share the opportunity with the mass, but that mass might be verticalized based on my marketing efforts. Maybe my audience is a certain segment of people that have understanding a little bit for real estate. Maybe it's a younger audience, older audience, combination of audience, but know your audience, establish that up front. And that's what Jason, I think, we've had lots of conversations on this. You keep, who are we trying to reach? And don't try to be everybody to everybody. I want to close out on something that people go, what's a successful raise and what's a softer raise? I saw a company and it was truly amazing to me, and I'll be quite candid. And this isn't to disparage the marketing on this side, but the webs, I hear the CEO tell that story. I said, oh my gosh, this is amazing. You're going to save lives. This is dramatic. And then I see a web page and I have to read a medical dictionary to understand what they did. Not going to work. Get out there, put your face out there, get that development of trust, tell that story. In 30 seconds, the individual told me, and I'm going, everybody should know this. If you're not willing to do that or have somebody in your firm do that, maybe just take a step back and reflect a little bit, because the crowdfunding, lots of successes, lots of soft raises, and lots of failures, but it's no different than any capital raise. On that, I want to close out. Everybody, I thank you. It's always insightful. There's so much more that we can discuss on this, and hopefully it was helpful to our audience. And the audience can participate, can revisit these web summits, get reposted. So again, to Sherwood, to Jamie and Jason, I really, really appreciate the time you've extended to us today. And happy fundraising to everybody out there. So cheers. Thanks, guys.
But
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.